Yeah. Okay, there you go. Okay, so if you want to use Lumibot, okay, this is how you do it. So first of all, you go into Lumibot, you clone it to your computer, right? So I like to use GitHub Desktop, so I clone it to my computer that way, or you can just do the typical Git clone stuff, right? Typical
Hmm.
clone process to the computer. And then some people will use a virtual environment. I do it a little differently, just because I don't know, virtual environments kind of drive me a little crazy. Personally, what I do is I have a folder that I call strategies, and then inside of that folder, I have all of Lumibot, and then I have some code that looks like, let's see, what's some of it looks like this, right? You can basically import OS and then add to path Lumibot, right? So add to path that this folder Lumibot. And when you do that, it overrides your pip install, right? So instead of the pip installed Lumibot, it's going to go directly into this all the stuff in this folder.
Yeah, that makes sense. I noticed that in the code that you would put in Discord earlier too.
Yeah, yeah, I have that in a bunch of code. I just use it for debugging purposes, right?
Makes
Um,
sense.
Yeah, so you could do that. Other people that use virtual environments, that's probably the better way of doing it, to be honest with you. Create a virtual environment, put the Lumibot library inside that virtual environment, and that way you can have a pip installed Lumibot somewhere else, right? And then if you have it inside the virtual environment, you can just access that folder, right?
Hmm.
Either way, whichever way you decide to do it, right? You have your Lumibot folder from GitHub, and then you have, either a virtual environment or you just directly tell the system to use that path for your projects, right? Okay, cool. So that's how you get it set up. Hopefully that's not too difficult. Not a lot of people have too much trouble with that. But then here's how this project is actually laid out. Okay. So we have Lumibot, the folder there, the top level folder. Inside that folder, we have a bunch of things. Distribution, you don't need to worry about that. We have docs, the documentation, the doc source documentation. So this is where that whole Lumibot website comes from. This is lumibot.lumiwealth.com. That's where this comes from. It's from that doc SRC folder, which
Makes
compiles the
sense.
doc, right? So if you ever want to do that, that's in there, right? We have our tests here, right? All the different tests that we run. We have tests for back tests, right? Which is inside of our examples folder somewhere. I think inside of Lumibot back testing. Where's that? Strategies, no, example strategies. So these here example strategies are, tested by these tests here. And then we
It
have a
makes
bunch of
sense.
others as well, testing alpaca, CCXD. We try to be as thorough with our testing as possible. I never feel like we have enough. I feel like that's typical. You know what I mean? But we try to be really
Yeah,
good at tests. We have automated testing. So if you push something to Lumibot, it automatically runs a test and checks, is everything still running,
sure.
right?
Makes sense.
Right. So, but that only happens if you have write access to Lumibot,
Hmm.
right? Which means that because some people do a fork of Lumibot and then
Sure.
with a fork. If you do that, then you don't have the environment variables needed to run the tests, and they're all going to fail, right? So it's better
Okay.
to give you direct write access to Lumibot, and you use this direct uh, uh, GitHub repository, right? As opposed to
Sure.
your own, right?
So essentially, do you use pull requests?
Yeah, yeah. So
Okay.
you'd take this code to your local environment, make the
Yep.
changes that you want, put it up on a branch. You can't push on the dev branch; it's
Sure.
restricted, right? We do that on purpose, obviously. And then
Hmm.
you'll create your own branch, create a pull request into dev, and then we'll have some people review it, and then you can get that merged in, right? And the
Perfect.
tests run automatically. So, for example, here's some pull requests that are here by some people working on stuff that I got to review. You see all checks have passed, right? This is all the unit tests have worked, right?
Hmm.
Fortunate. Okay. So yes, that's testing. We talked about documentation. We talked about example strategies inside the Lumibot folder. And now let's get into the meat of it, right? So the meat of it, we have, let's go through one folder at a time. We have back testing, which is of course all the back testing stuff, right? These are different back testing basically sources that we can use. Kind of the typical, most people use these days either Yahoo or Polygon, right? Yahoo is going to use the Yahoo Finance data as a data source to backtest stuff. Polygon is going to use polygon.io. This is probably our most thorough backtesting we have right now that's just built directly into it. You get 2 years for free with them. It can go a little slow if you get the free version. If you get the paid version, it speeds it up, and the more you pay, the more years you get, and it goes faster, right? So that's Polygon. Then there's Theta Data, which has really good options data. At this point in time, it's almost finished, but actually it is finished, but it's still a little bit off with some of the numbers, right? It doesn't exactly match Polygon, so we haven't had a chance to fix that yet. The guy that's been working on it, he's been looking for a job right now because he when he was working on this, he was a student. And now he's like trying to actually get a salary, right? So he'll probably come back and finish that off. But Theta Data is really,
Details.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Money details, right? But Theta Data is really good because they have really good options data. They have like bid ask prices and stuff like that, whereas Polygon does not. So they have more data, they have bid and ask, but they're a little bit off right now. Then there's pandas, which is basically if you want to load up a CSV file.
Sure.
There's CTXT if you want to get data from crypto exchanges. There's Alpha Vantage, which I don't think works right now, and Alpaca, which I don't think works either. Those two are kind of whatever. And then there's Backtesting Broker, which they're all based off of, right? So Backtesting Broker is the main thing that does all the backtesting, right? And then all the other ones inherit from it, right? So Yahoo, right? Basically just inherits, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Panda.
These are all
Oh,
subclasses or child classes. Yep.
yeah, exactly. They all inherit from that. The backtesting brokers, where all the backtesting magic happens, if you ever want to jump into it. Kind of one of the main parts of the backtesting that I'm typically going into here is process pending orders. This is like the core of all the backtesting. Process pending orders, right? Because it's gonna basically run this thing. It's basically going to run this thing and then it'll go through, okay, well, what orders do we have? What data source are you using? Get your open, high, low, close prices. Then basically, if it's a market order, your price is filled at the open. If it's a limit order, then you have to do some calculations within this limit order function, because did the limit order get executed or not? Stop order, same thing. Stop limits, trailing stops, all that stuff, right? That's kind of the meat of the back testing. All right. Cool. Any questions on that?
No, looks good.
Okay, awesome. So that's back testing. Then we have brokers, which is, of course, the brokers. Okay. But brokers are really broken up into two things. Is brokers and data sources. Okay. So the broker is meant to do like all the execution, right? So
Hmm.
here's an Alpaca broker, for example. You'll have, let's see the functions here. Right, you go Alpaca, order data, no Alpaca. Okay, so you have, is the market open? Pull your positions, parse your positions, submit orders, stream objects, all that kind of stuff, right? So really, kind of the main thing here is like submit an order. Um, is the market open? Cancel orders. It's mostly like order related stuff, right? Okay. And then there's stuff in here for pulling positions, whatever. Actually, our newer stuff, if you look at Tradier, is organized a little better. This is actually probably a better one to look at. Alpaca actually needs to be cleaned up a bit because these things pull positions, get balances, all that stuff should be in a data source, actually, right? That's so Tradier is a newer one that
Yeah,
has,
better. The newer stuff has better separation of duties. Yep.
yes, exactly, exactly. So here's Tradier, right? You have submit orders, pull positions,
Oh,
has
and
this,
there are so many cases now where you might need to use something else to get the data rather than so one an execution environment and get the data from somewhere else.
Yeah, I mean, we actually have it set up that you can do that. Yes. So you can have a data, you can mix and match data sources theoretically, right? So you can have your execution going through Alpaca and you can have your data source coming from CCXT, for example. That is technically possible with the way that we've set it up. I've never tried it, but you should be able to do that or get data from Polygon for trading and then actually place the trades through Alpaca. That should be possible with the way that this is set up, right? Um, all of these brokers, they're all based off the broker object in here, right? Which is kind of just what was it called? There's a name for this, but basically it's just a bunch of the functions with pass that say they're all abstracted, right? Which means that if you ever want,
Scaffolding or skeleton functions. Yeah, I don't remember
yeah,
what the exact term is for them. I know what you mean. They're
right, exactly.
templates, basically, but
Exactly. So if you ever want to create a new broker, you would first start with copying this broker
they're
object.
they're designed
Right.
to be overloaded.
Exactly. And then you fill in all the methods, right? Okay, cool. So there's
Yeah,
also for
this
broker.
allows you to execute the functions, but they can be defined elsewhere
Right,
by the
exactly.
actual strategy. Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, so broker is kind of like defining everything, and then each broker itself will fill in what those functions should be doing, right? Yeah, so these are the only like really required ones, like pulling positions, pull position, pull an order, pull all orders, sync positions. That's already done for you. Get last price, get last prices. These are all things that these actually is called to data source, which we'll get to next, right? But basically, all the ones with past you would need to fill in if you want to make a new broker, right? And then speaking of data sources, here's a data source. So for example, Tradier now, this has all the stuff that's actually getting data, get chains, get historical prices, all that stuff lives in here. The broker is really just calling these methods, right? So get historical prices, get last price, get quote, all that kind of stuff is in here, right? And then same thing, it's based off of data source. Everything inherits from this. And it's also skeleton methods, right? Or they'll just pass. So if you ever want to create another broker, you would just make another file with that broker name, fill in all these things, and you could actually have that thing work, right? So if you want to ever add a new broker, you create a new broker class that inherits from broker, and you create a new data source class that inherits from data source, and then fill in all the stuff that it has pass in it, right? Okay, cool. So that's brokers, data sources. We started working on components. This is a future endeavor where we basically want to, I don't know if you've noticed some of our newer algorithms, they all started using component systems because our new algorithms are getting to be
These
quite
like
large.
sub algorithms, so you can have some built-in algorithms that you could reference in a strategy.
So let me show you an example of a component, right? So here is, let me go options, Condor, Martingale, right? Inside of here, right? Oops, I have to blank that out. Um, inside of here, we have components right there. Okay. So here's a component for, is this the right one? Actually, let me show you Condor Martingale components. Right. We have an options helper component, that has, okay, create a spread, check the max spread for an asset, create a multi-leg limit price, right?
Hmm.
Right. Then there's like a VIX helper, right? Which can check the max for GVX, check, this is the different like VIX. GVX is like the VIX for gold, right? Um, RSI values for that, VIX values, VIX 1 day values. But basically all the functions live in here that deal with the VIX helper. And it's like this. You basically go into.
So volatility. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So basically you'd load the components like this, right? You'd go options helper, right? You'd import it up at the top, right? From components, options helper, for example, and then you'd initialize it in the initialize function, right? And then to use it, you'd go options helper dot find next valid
Yeah,
option.
so these are essentially helper classes for
Yeah,
various different things. Yep, makes sense.
yeah,
So,
exactly.
whereas before you'd probably have to build it in as a function inside the strategy, now you can pull that out as a separate class and then
Exactly.
just
Exactly.
import it in. Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, so that's one thing is it just adds organization. But then there's
Hmm.
also the fact that you reuse a lot of these things, right?
Sure,
Like we
makes
use
sense.
VIX in like 5 different
Yeah,
algorithms.
it wouldn't make sense to maintain it in five different strategies.
Exactly. Exactly. So that's
Yep.
why we're starting to add components directly into Lumibot that you can use, right? You can see there's only one in here so far, but we're going to add more. And we're also thinking about making like an entirely different library for components and kind of turning this into like almost like an app store type thing for components that like
Hmm.
they can mix and match. People could create their own and people could make their own GitHub libraries. They could import and use their components, right? We want to create that sort of environment, right? That's
Yeah,
that's
makes sense.
the first attempt at that,
Pretty
right?
cool.
Yeah.
I did have a quick question on your structure and your folder structure that you use here.
Okay.
How are you committing those individual strategies? Because I think they're under separate repos, or are they all under one repo?
You mean these ones down here, my strategies folder outside of
Yes.
Lumibot? Yeah, so
Oh,
these are, I mean, I do have another repo that I do for this personally, but
yeah.
I mean, that's a little messy, to be honest with you.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, I mean, you could just have like example code outside here that's running the Lumibot stuff, right? You could do
Yep.
that, right? Um, Other people have set it up differently. This is the way I have it set up. I know other people have set it up differently.
Yeah. I mean, you could set up a separate project folder for the individual strategies that you're working on, and then as long as you're referencing the folder that Lumibot is, hold down to, you can do it that way too.
Yeah, you could definitely do it that way. The only thing though is when you're debugging, right? When you
Hmm.
run a debugger, it's useful to have all of the code inside of one instance of Visual Studio Code
Well, yeah,
because
you can have multiple. Yeah, this would work. I've done this before. You can have multiple folders underneath a given project or workspace in VS
yep.
Code, and then each of those folders can have their own repository.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, that's definitely one thing. That's definitely another way that you can set up. I honestly, I think I'm the
Yeah, I
messenger
was just
for this
no
stuff.
no judgment. No, I'm just kind of curious how you would commit them because I'm sure you have to commit. So some of these things, like the built-in example strategies, obviously are going to be part of the Lumibot repo. But if you're
Yeah,
working on a strategy outside of it, you're not going to commit it
yeah,
in the
exactly.
same. Yeah.
So this
Okay.
Lumibot folder, this is a repo, right? For Lumibot, this is the actual Lumibot repo that's on my computer.
Sure. Yep.
All the stuff outside of it is in a different repository that is
Yep.
private to myself that I have all these
Sure.
things.
Makes sense. Yep.
Yeah,
And you
exactly.
must have an ignore for the Lumibot folder. Yep.
Yeah, yes, something along those lines. Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. So we went through, so we did backtesting, brokers, components, data sources, entities. This is where we have things like, okay, an asset, right? If you want to create an asset, right? There's all the different things. What's the asset type? What's the right? The initialization of that asset. There's checking if it's valid to convert it to a dictionary, all that stuff here for an asset, for an order, same thing, right? This is actual order object, right? You have all the order class stuff and everything in here too. Position, same thing. So these are like the entities. These are things that get passed around, right? So like a broker, Alpaca would, if you're submitting an order, will take an order object, submit that, change the status on it, whatever, and they're all just passing around these entities here, right? Okay. Then we have example strategies, which you've talked about, right? There's a bunch in here if you want to use them. Some of them kind of need to be updated. Some of them aren't using all the latest stuff that we have. We try to keep them up to date, but it's a lot to maintain.
Sure.
Um, then we have resources here. This is, I forget what we use this for. Then we have strategies, which confuses people. To be honest with you, we should probably rename this to like strategy, right?
Yeah,
The
I mean,
guy
this is the underlying objects that
yes.
you're, so, this is the template class for all your strategies.
Yeah, exactly. So strategy, when you when you make your own strategy, you inherit from
Mm-hmm.
this class, right?
Yep.
So for example, we'll take an example strategy, say this one here. Notice CCXC backtesting example inherits from strategy, right? And then strategy is that's like where the bulk of all the stuff happens, right? There's lots and lots of things in this file. To be honest with you, we
You could honestly put it in the entities folder and it would sort of make sense. But
maybe. Strategy is definitely a lot. There's a lot of stuff in here,
yeah,
right? So this one's pretty simple. This is kind of like, minutes before closing and sleep time and all the like portfolio value and cash. Is it the first iteration, right? All those things are in here. Logging messages, right? All the like basic functions are in here. Create an order, right? All that stuff. Okay. And then this one inherits from underscore strategy, which is like the meat of it. Like this is like a lot of stuff in here. Like all the like internal functionality of a strategy is mostly an underscore strategy. To be quite honest with you, I think we should break this file up. It's like 2,000 something lines of code. But yeah, this is kind of where all the like magic happens for Lumibot, right? It's like you make your strategy, which inherits from strategy, which inherits from underscore strategy, and then all that stuff like imports your broker, right? And the broker does all the work, right?
makes
Okay,
sense.
all right. So it's that. And then there's strategy executor, which basically executes all the stuff on a strategy. This is where the loop stuff is happening, right? So here's the main while loop, for example, right? The main loop for the strategy, right? While goes on forever, right? As long as should continue, both of these are true. It's just going to go on forever, right? And then in here, you could see that it basically runs the stuff, checks for errors, yada, yada, and then sleeps, and then basically runs the strategy itself, right? This is run trading session here, right? So run trading session, and then there's an accept thing going on, right? So all this is kind of like the main loop, and running trading session is where all the stuff gets run, right? That's the guts of it, right? So all the like guts of Lumibot, how it all works and functions, is all inside the strategies folder, right? Between underscore strategy, strategy executor, and strategy, that's like 80% of what's happening, right? And the rest of it is just like broker specific, right? Okay, so it's strategies. Then we have tools, which are kind of just helpers. These things do all sorts of different stuff. Create indicators, debugging, Black-Scholes calculations, helping with Yahoo, helping with Polygon, all helping with Theta data. There's like a bunch of just like helper functions in there. Then there's trader, right? All the trader stuff in here, right? This is also pretty core to everything. This is where you actually run the functions or run all the strategies. So you know where you go in your actual strategy, you'll go add strategy and then run all. This is where that's happening, right? And then this basically loads up strategy and all that kind of stuff, right? And then trading built-ins. There's some additional tools in here, but that's basically it. Oh, and then there's credentials. This one's pretty important too. This is what loads your env file, right? So if you're ever wondering how does Lumibot actually load in your API keys and all that kind of stuff, it gets loaded in from this credentials py folder. Yeah, you can see here, you go down, it's basically like loads is back testing. Should you hide trades? These are all inside the environment variables, right? Live config, show plots, show indicators, right? These are all the environment variables they can set in an env file or in your environment variables if you're running it on a server, right? Your Alpaca config, right? Your API keys for Alpaca, API keys for Tradier, etc. This is all in credentials. We used to have this. You'll see if you look at some of our older code, we had a different credentials for each strategy. And then we're like, look, we're just repeating this thing over and over again. We just added it directly into Lumibot.
Yeah, I know. I noticed because I used it before you did that.
Cool.
Makes
Awesome.
sense. Makes sense. I think it's a lot better this way.
Awesome. So yeah, so if you're going to be adding in stuff into the actual back test itself, because I know that's something that we talked about you working on, you'd be mostly working inside of indicators, right? Indicators is what has plot indicators, plot returns, all that kind of stuff, right? All that magic happens here. So for example, right now we have the tear sheet is having issues with what's it called? With
With the future strategy.
yeah, with futures. That's the word I was looking for futures. Sorry,
Yep.
lost the word there.
No,
Um,
it's all good.
th- this is what's doing that, right? So if you want to actually fix that, you'd go into this create tear sheet function inside of indicators, inside of tools. Okay. All right, so it's creating that. And then if you want to add in trading view, if you want to add in trading view, you'd create
Be
another.
in the same file. Well, there's part of that in there too, right? Because the execution of the functions that actually generate those indicators are in that there, right?
That generate the indicators. Yeah, CAGR, volatility, yeah, all that stuff is in here, total return, etc. Yeah. Yeah,
I
but
think there
for
was drawing the line and stuff like that, which I think it was towards the bottom there.
yeah, so the drawing the line, this is for like drawing out like trades and stuff like that. It's here. This is using Plotly, right?
Yep.
You're familiar
Familiar
with
with them. Yep.
yeah, it looks familiar, I'm sure. Tear sheet does not do that. Tear sheet uses where is this
Quant
here?
stats, right?
Quant stats, exactly, right? So it's that quant
Yep.
stats, you
Yep.
know.
So it has its own HTML file that gets generated. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So there's something funky going on with this. The inputs or something are messed up with this one here.
Sure.
So the calculations are happening up here. I'm
Maybe
sure there's
the percentage calculations that get fed in. Maybe. I don't know.
yeah, so something's off. Who knows? Who knows what it is? It probably has something to do with the fact that it's a future and calculates it all weird. But something's wrong in here. And then if you were to create a trading view thing, they'd create another function like this, create trading view or something like that, create trading view chart, and then you call out the trading view functions and, pass it the data and all that.
Yep. Now they have light charts and advanced charts, and I'm guessing you'd want to do the advanced charts, right?
For Tradier or for
Trading view.
trading view.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, whatever best thing that we could do. Honestly, I'm not entirely sure how this whole thing would work inside of a GitHub thing. I haven't really played with TradingView's GitHub library. I know that it's sort of locked down. Last time I checked it, I spoke to them. I had to get like an API key for it and all that kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
I
So
think you still have to get to the actual code, but they have a repo with examples of usage, but the
yeah,
examples are none of them are Python. They're all JavaScript and
yeah, that makes
um
sense.
because I mean this it is a JavaScript application.
Yeah, it is.
It's just a matter of how we would. So I'm curious, and I have to get into it. How we would actually make that available to the user because you don't have a GUI for your application. Um, See if we can do it with a flat file like you do now, or whether we actually have to have a mini web server.
Yeah. Yeah. I
And
mean,
I'm
if
not
we do a
I'm
web
not sure.
server, we're basically putting together a website right now, so we could just add it to that, right? So we're actually in the process of
A web
deploying.
server out of the actual Lumibot
Yes, correct.
application. Okay,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, that could make sense.
Yeah, that like the whole thing that I was telling you about that we're basically gonna have, there's new thing that I created, where you have Lumibot API key, right? Lumibot or Lumi Wealth API key, right here. This is now set up so that strategy underscore strategy, Lumi Wealth API key, right? Let me show you this. Send update to cloud, right? This sends an update to our servers now, right? Which are collecting all this data and it's going to be displaying on a website that you'll be able to go to on your phone or whatever, right? It's not part of the Lumibot project, right? So with TradingView, we could presumably do the same thing. We could add it to that website. So when you run a back test, it takes you to our website and
That means
displays.
you would have to send the data to your server from the local Lumibot instance, right?
If we were to build it that way, then yes.
That might be a lot of data for you to handle. I don't know how many instances of Lumibot that are running concurrently, but
Yeah,
that
there's
could
definitely a lot.
potentially be a lot of data.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we'll see. I mean, I don't know exactly how the training view thing works, so it could be,
Because I think I have to look at it because I would imagine for the most part, we're just giving it OHLC data.
I mean,
Um,
you can fit a lot more than that, right? Like you can
well,
put
for the
indicators on a
underlying,
bar, you can,
for the underlying, yeah. So they have different bar chart types, like chart types and all that. But the
yeah,
underlying data, I think, is going to be open, high, low, close. It's just a matter of what resolution. But then, do we have to give it to it at the different chart resolutions for hourly, daily, whatever? You know what I mean? Because if it's an interactive chart, they can select from all those options.
right. Yeah, exactly. And
So
then
that,
there's also further things you could do. You could add trades to the chart. You could
oh
add
yeah, of course, yeah.
indicators, like there's all sorts of
No,
stuff, right?
I've seen it, because I did when I was first starting to do this stuff. I worked with PineScript first.
Nice. Perfect. So yeah,
Um,
so you're even more familiar with it than I am. So
yeah,
I've
well, because
trading view. If you've been
even though I'm from a programming background, my background on the trading part of it is not from a technical background. I saw it all from like the front end view,
yeah,
price action trading, but because I'm a programmer too, I trying to interpret what they're talking about, from a front end, from an end user perspective into
yeah,
into how you would do it as a computer. It's interesting that translation.
yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I don't know. I've messed around with PineScript a bit. I kind of have some understanding of it. I got a little bit frustrated with the limitations, so I'm like, this just doesn't. It's it's like basic stuff. Like I mean, if you want
They
to do like
can't
price
even tell
action,
you, how much memory you're. So that I kept running into memory issues now too, and it's like it depends on the user too. So like one user hits the memory limit, another user of the same code doesn't. With
that's weird.
the same instrument, same indicators. I'm just like,
Huh.
and they don't even really have so now they have a logging tool. When I was developing this more before, they didn't. So I had to like roll my own, like write content onto the chart so that I could try to debug and figure out what the heck was going on. It's better, but it's not a full programming language. It's very limited. They do have some, interestingly, it is similar to Python in some respects, like some of the syntax and the way things are, the structure, the way that's written is similar, but it's extremely simplified.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But
Yeah,
uh, but
this is why we made Lumibot, right? Because then you could actually use Python. Like all these other things, they make their own language. Like I've tried to make my own programming language before when I was younger, and it's just this is not a good idea. You know, like that's a very like that's an entire project on its own, and then you have to make it useful, right? It's like it's just silly. Just use Python, right?
no, and
So
it was a good forethought too, because some other programming languages were more popular historically. .NET is a big one, but the technical debt that you need to support a .NET platform is huge.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So I mean, Python, it runs in a just-in-time compiler, I think is how it runs, right? Or I guess you can run it that way. Depends on which runtime environment you use to actually execute the Python. But it's very convenient. It's cross-platform. It doesn't depend on a bunch of Microsoft tools like .NET does.
Yep, and it's really good with AI, right? And that's kind of
Yeah,
what.
well, and one big thing is, that you've been fortunate on is it's become very, very popular.
Yeah.
It's among the top three in popularity, if
Yeah,
I'm not
I
mistaken.
think JavaScript and Python are the most used languages on Earth.
I think you're right. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's not going away. It's becoming more popular because it's
Yep.
just, oh, I'm saving so much time by not having to encapsulate all of my objects and functions and classes.
Yep.
Just using indents, I don't have to write those brackets anymore.
Yep. Yeah, for sure.
All right. Unfortunately, I have to get going because I have to go pick up my kids from school. But this was great. I'm sure as I dig into this, I'm sure I'll have some questions if you know, whether we can do it by Discord, if we have to do another meeting, that's totally
Yeah,
fine.
absolutely. Just let me know if you need any help with anything. Just let me know, and we can go through anything. And I could also introduce you to other developers on the team too. There's quite a few people working on
Cool.
this project. So, between me and between all these other people, we could all help each other out,
Yeah, for sure. Makes sense. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right.
All right.
I'll talk to you later.
All right. Have a nice weekend.
You too.